Are you doing everything right on keto, but not losing fat? What if I told you some of your favorite keto foods are secretly spiking your insulin and stopping fat burning cold? Today, I'm breaking down 8 keto foods that look healthy, but can sabotage your metabolism. You're not failing keto, and that might be the most important truth you hear today. Because what if the real problem isn't your discipline, your willpower, or even your diet, but a hidden hormone quietly controlling everything behind the scenes, insulin? This single hormone decides whether your body burns fat or stores it. And here's the part that most people never hear: keto only works when insulin stays low. Not sometimes, not occasionally, consistently. You could be eating low carbs every day, avoiding sugar, skipping bread, doing everything you've been told, and still not losing fat. That's not bad luck. That's biology. When insulin is elevated, your body is in storage mode. It doesn't matter if you're eating 200 calories or 3,000. As long as insulin is high, your body is being told one thing: hold on to fat. And the most dangerous part? Insulin doesn't just respond to sugar, it responds to signals, to patterns, to certain foods that look harmless, even keto friendly. There's something called the cephalic phase insulin response. It means your body can release insulin before food even hits your bloodstream. Just the taste of sweetness without any real sugar can trigger it. That zero carb sweetener in your coffee, it might already be telling your body to store fat, and suddenly your cravings make sense. Because insulin doesn't just store fat, it drives hunger. It creates the urge to eat again, even when your body doesn't need energy. So you snack, you reach for another keto treat, and each time you do, insulin rises again. Now your body never gets the signal to burn fat. This is why so many people feel stuck, not because keto doesn't work, but because insulin never truly drops. Let's go deeper. Dairy products, cheese, cream, yogurt are often considered staples in keto diets, but the proteins in dairy, especially whey, are highly insulinogenic. In some cases, they trigger a stronger insulin response than white bread. Think about that for a second. A food with almost no carbs can spike insulin more than a high-carb food. That's not opinion. That's measured in clinical studies. So you're eating cheese, thinking you're staying in ketosis, but your hormones are telling a completely different story. And then come the keto snacks, bars, cookies, shakes, all labeled low carb, sugar-free, keto approved. But many of them are filled with processed fibers, hidden starches, and artificial ingredients that your body doesn't ignore. They digest differently than advertised, they raise blood glucose more than expected, and insulin follows closely behind. The label says keto. Your metabolism says otherwise, and here's where it becomes a cycle. You eat these foods, insulin rises, fat burning shuts down, hunger increases, and you eat again. Not because you lack control, but because your hormones are driving the behavior. Now let's talk about frequency. Every time you eat, insulin goes up. That's normal. That's how the body works. But when you eat all day, snacking every few hours, even on keto, you keep insulin elevated from morning to night. There's no gap, no window for fat burning. Your body never gets the chance to switch from storing energy to using it. And that's where intermittent fasting becomes powerful. Not because it's trendy, but because it creates time where insulin can finally drop. When insulin drops low enough, something incredible happens. Your body shifts. It starts pulling energy from stored fat. Ketones rise, hunger stabilizes, energy becomes steady. But this only happens when insulin is allowed to fall, not constantly triggered, not repeatedly spiked. And this is the part most people miss. Keto isn't just a list of foods, it's a hormonal strategy. If you follow the food rules, but ignore the hormone response, you'll never get the full result. You'll feel like you're doing everything right and still wonder why nothing is changing, because underneath it all, insulin is still in control. So the solution isn't more restriction, it's more awareness. It's asking a different question, not is this low carb, but what is this doing to my insulin? That one shift changes everything. It moves you from guessing to understanding, from frustration to control. Because once you start minimizing insulin spikes, cutting out artificial triggers, reducing snacking, simplifying your food choices, your body responds fast. Fat loss becomes easier, hunger becomes quieter, energy becomes stable, not because you're trying harder, but because your biology is finally working with you instead of against you. And that's the truth most people never hear. Keto doesn't fail, but if insulin stays high, fat burning never begins. What if the foods you trust the most are the exact ones holding you back? Not junk food, not sugar, not the obvious culprits, but the healthy keto foods you eat every single day, believing they're helping you burn fat. This is where the real story begins, because fat loss isn't just about what you remove, it's about what your body detects. And your body is far more intelligent than any label, any trend, or any diet rule you've been told to follow. There are hidden triggers, silent metabolic signals that can keep your body locked in fat storage mode, even while you're doing keto perfectly on paper. Take nuts, for example. They're natural. They're low in carbs. They're packed with healthy fats. Everything about them screams keto-friendly. But here's the hidden truth. Nuts are incredibly easy to overeat. A small handful turns into hundreds of calories before your brain even registers fullness. And beyond calories, nuts still contain carbohydrates, not zero, not insignificant, enough to matter, especially when consumed in large amounts. Studies have shown that frequent nut consumption can still produce measurable insulin responses, particularly when portions are uncontrolled. And once insulin rises, fat burning pauses, not permanently, but long enough to slow your progress. Now multiply that by daily habits. A handful here, a snack there, every day. That's not harmless anymore. That's a pattern, and patterns shape hormones. Now let's talk about cheese. Rich, satisfying, deeply embedded in keto culture. It feels safe. It feels indulgent without consequences. But dairy contains specific proteins, casein and whey, that stimulate insulin in ways most people never expect. In fact, research comparing insulin response to different foods has shown that dairy products can produce a disproportionately high insulin release relative to their carbohydrate content, meaning low carbs doesn't mean low insulin. So you're adding cheese to every meal, thinking you're reinforcing ketosis, while your body is quietly receiving a different signal. Store energy, slow fat burning, stay comfortable, and then there's keto bread, the ultimate comfort replacement. Soft, familiar, labeled low net carbs, marketed as guilt-free. But here's the problem. Net carbs is not a biological term, it's a marketing concept. Your body doesn't subtract fiber the way food labels do. Some of those fibers, especially processed ones, are partially digested. They do raise blood glucose, they do trigger insulin. And this isn't theory. Continuous glucose monitors have shown real spikes in people eating keto bread, spikes that look almost identical to traditional carbs in some cases. So what you thought was safe becomes a hidden disruption. And then comes the most underestimated factor of all, snacking. Not what you eat, but how often you eat. Every time you take a bite of food, insulin rises. That's normal. That's physiology. But when eating becomes constant, every few hours, small snacks, little bites, you never give insulin a chance to fall. You stay in a prolonged state of mild elevation, not high enough to notice, but not low enough to burn fat. And that's where progress stalls, because fat burning doesn't happen when insulin is lowish. It happens when insulin is consistently low. That requires time, gaps, periods of not eating. But modern habits have erased that completely. We snack out of boredom, out of routine, even out of fear that we might get hungry later. And every one of those moments sends the same message to the body. Energy is coming in. Don't burn what we already have. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. You're eating keto bread in the morning, snacking on nuts in the afternoon, adding cheese to every meal, reaching for a keto bar at night. Individually, each choice seems small, but together, they create a hormonal environment where insulin never truly drops. And without that drop, fat burning never fully turns on. This is why so many people feel stuck. They're not breaking the rules, they're following them, but the rules they've been given are incomplete because they focus on food categories instead of hormonal impact. Your body doesn't care about labels. It responds to signals, chemical signals, hormonal signals, repeated patterns over time. And when those signals say store, it listens. No matter how disciplined you are, no matter how motivated you feel, this isn't about effort. It's about alignment. Aligning your habits with how your metabolism actually works. And the moment you start doing that, everything changes. When you reduce snacking, insulin gets space to fall. When you remove processed keto foods, your body stops receiving mixed signals. When you simplify your diet to whole, unprocessed foods, your metabolism becomes predictable again, stable, efficient, responsive. Hunger decreases, energy increases, fat loss resumes, not because you forced it, but because you finally allowed it. And that's the hidden truth behind keto traps. They don't look dangerous, they don't feel harmful, but they quietly keep you stuck in the exact state you're trying to escape. So the next time you reach for something labeled keto, pause for a moment and ask a better question. Not, does this fit my diet? But what is this doing to my body? Because once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. And once you change the signal, the results will follow. Keto works until it doesn't. That's the moment most people never forget. The scale stops moving, the energy dips, the excitement fades, and the question begins to echo louder every day. What am I doing wrong? But what if the better question is, what changed? Because keto doesn't suddenly stop working. Your body doesn't just break. Something shifts beneath the surface, something subtle, something almost invisible, but powerful enough to shut down fat burning completely. It starts slowly. At first, you're strict, focused, disciplined. You cut carbs, avoid sugar, and your body responds fast. Weight drops, hunger decreases. You feel in control again. But then comfort creeps in. You discover keto sweeteners, keto snacks, keto bread, foods that promise all the pleasure without the consequences. And it feels like a breakthrough. Finally, you can enjoy the foods you missed without ruining your progress. But your body doesn't see it that way because your metabolism doesn't run on labels. It runs on chemistry, and chemistry doesn't lie. Artificial sweeteners may have 0 calories, but they don't have 0 effect. Research has shown that sweet taste alone can trigger insulin release in some individuals. It's a primitive survival mechanism. The body prepares for incoming sugar even when it never arrives. And when insulin rises even slightly, fat burning pauses, not dramatically, not instantly noticeable, but enough to slow things down. And when that happens repeatedly, day after day, the slowdown becomes a stall. Then come the snacks. Packaged, convenient, marketed as keto-friendly, but many of these products contain hidden starches, processed fibers, and sugar alcohols that don't behave the way you've been told. They're digested, partially absorbed, converted. Continuous glucose monitor data has revealed that some keto products can spike blood sugar in certain individuals almost as much as traditional carbohydrates. And where glucose goes, insulin follows. Now your body is receiving mixed signals. You think you're in ketosis, but your hormones are telling a different story. Burn fat, then stop. Burn fat, then stop. A metabolic tug of war with no clear winner. And then there's protein, essential, necessary, often misunderstood. On keto, protein is supposed to be moderate, but over time, many people increase it. More meat, more shakes, more clean eating. It feels healthy, it feels right, but excess protein doesn't just disappear. Through a process called gluconeogenesis, your body converts extra protein into glucose. Not all of it, not instantly, but enough to matter, enough to raise blood sugar, enough to trigger insulin. And once again, fat burning slows. Now add dairy into the mix, cheese, cream, yogurt, staples of keto comfort. But dairy proteins, especially whey, are highly insulinogenic. Studies comparing insulin response to different foods have shown that dairy can provoke a significant insulin spike, even when carbohydrate content is low. So you're eating low carb, but your insulin is behaving as if you didn't. And here's where everything connects. You're consuming sweeteners that trigger anticipation, snacking on processed keto foods that raise glucose, eating more protein than your body needs, adding dairy that amplifies insulin response, and doing it frequently, multiple meals, multiple snacks, very little time in between. Individually, each action seems harmless. Together, they create a constant state of elevated insulin, not extreme, not obvious, but persistent. And persistence is what matters most because your body doesn't respond to single moments. It responds to patterns, repeated signals, daily habits, hormonal rhythms that shape how energy is stored or burned. And when insulin remains elevated, even slightly, your body stays in storage mode. Fat becomes inaccessible. Energy becomes unstable. Hunger begins to creep back in. And the most frustrating part, it feels like nothing changed. You're still doing keto, still avoiding sugar, still watching carbs, but underneath it all, the hormonal environment has shifted, and that shift is enough to stop progress completely. This is why so many people blame themselves. They think they've lost discipline. They think their body has adapted or slowed down or somehow become resistant. But the truth is far simpler. The signals changed, and the body responded exactly the way it was designed to. Because your metabolism is not broken, it's obedient. It follows instructions, chemical instructions, delivered through hormones like insulin. So when keto stops working, it's not a failure. It's feedback, a signal that something in the system is no longer aligned. And the solution isn't more restriction, it's more precision. It's removing the noise, cutting out the sweeteners that confuse your brain, eliminating the processed foods that distort your metabolism, bringing protein back to a moderate level, reducing dairy to intentional limited use. And most importantly, creating space between meals. Because when you stop constantly feeding the system, insulin finally has a chance to fall. And when insulin falls low enough, consistently enough, your body remembers what to do. It returns to fat burning, not forcefully, not dramatically, but naturally, steadily, predictably. Energy stabilizes, hunger fades, progress resumes, and suddenly keto works again. Not because you found a new trick, but because you removed the interference, because you stopped sending mixed signals and started speaking the language your body understands: hormones, patterns, consistency. That's the real mechanism behind fat loss. And once you see it, everything changes.